It is February 15th, 1910. The air is cold, crisp, and heavy with the scent of pine and distant smoke. Snow clings stubbornly to the rooftops. The streets of Otwock, lined with modest homes, their chimneys exhaling steady streams of white into the morning sky. Winter still grips this small Polish town, just a short journey from the grand city of Warsaw. A horse-drawn carriage rattles down the narrow road, its wheels carving fresh tracks into the frozen earth. Inside, a woman clutches her swollen belly, her breath quick and shallow. Janina Krzyżanowska is a strong woman, but the pain is sharp, and she knows her child is coming. The building they arrive at is not a grand hospital, but a modest clinic, the kind that serves the working people of Otwock. Her husband, Dr. Stanisław Krzyżanowski, paces just outside the door, his breath misting in the frigid air. He is a respected man in this town, known for treating the poor, for refusing to turn away the sick even if they cannot pay. His patients, many of them Jewish families who have nowhere else to go, whisper prayers for him that morning, unaware that his own family is about to grow. Inside, Janina grips the hands of the midwife, her cries swallowed by the thick walls. The hours pass slowly until finally a sharp cry fills the room. A baby girl, pink and wailing, her tiny fists clenched against the cold. They name her Irena. The midwife swaddles the newborn, placing her into Janina's arms. Outside, a weak winter sun breaks through the heavy clouds, casting a pale light over the snow-dusted town. It is a simple birth, an unremarkable day in the grand scope of history. But this child, this tiny, fragile thing, will one day grow into a woman of unshakable courage, a woman who will defy an empire, who will save thousands. And so, on this cold February day, in a quiet Polish town, history begins, wrapped in blankets, cradled in her mother's arms, unaware of the storm that the world is becoming. Warsaw, Poland, the early 1920s. The world is still reeling from the aftermath of the Great War, but for a young girl named Irena Sendler, life is filled with the scent of freshly baked bread from the family kitchen, the rhythmic hum of her mother's lullabies, and the weight of books carried home from school. Irena's father, Dr. Stanisław Krzyżanowski, is one of the few doctors in the area willing to treat Jewish patients when others turn them away. He believes deeply in compassion, a value he instills in his daughter from the moment she can walk. But kindness comes at a cost. When a typhus outbreak sweeps through the community, Dr. Krzyżanowski, refusing to abandon the sick, contracts the disease himself. Irena is just 7 years old when she watches her father grow weak, his once strong hands trembling, his voice fading to a whisper. Before he dies, he leaves her with words that will guide her life. If you see someone drowning, you must jump in and save them, even if you don't know how to swim. The loss is shattering, but Irena finds solace in books. She throws herself into her studies, enrolling at the University of Warsaw. It is there, as a young woman, that she begins to see Poland through new eyes. The Jewish population, a thriving part of Warsaw's fabric, faces growing discrimination. Even in her university lectures, Jewish students are forced to sit separately, confined to what is cruelly called the ghetto bench. Irena refuses to comply, deliberately sitting among them in defiance. This is where her quiet rebellion begins. Across the border in Germany, something dark is stirring. The 1930s bring economic despair, and with it, the rise of a man named Adolf Hitler. His voice crackles over the radio, sharp and commanding, filling German households with promises of a new era. The Nazi Party's influence spreads like ink in water, staining every aspect of life. Jews are blamed for the country's struggles, their businesses boycotted, their rights stripped away. By 1933, Hitler is Chancellor. Books are burning in the streets of Berlin. Science, philosophy, art, any knowledge that contradicts the Nazi ideology is reduced to ashes. And then the violence begins. In 1938, Kristallnacht shatters whatever illusions remained. Synagogues are torched, Jewish-owned stores lie in ruins, and thousands are sent to concentration camps. The world watches, horrified, but largely silent. Irena sees it all. From Warsaw she hears the whispers of families desperate to flee, of trains heading west filled with refugees, of letters arriving from Germany, ink smudged with fear. Poland stands on the precipice of something unthinkable. It is September 1st, 1939. The world is about to change. The roar of German bombers echoes across Poland as the Nazi war machine surges forward, steamrolling through the country with ruthless efficiency. In Warsaw, buildings tremble as explosions shatter the morning calm. Panic spreads through the city, like wildfire, families clutching their children, trying to flee, trying to make sense of what is happening. Amidst the chaos, in a small office within Warsaw's social welfare department, a young woman listens. She listens to the distant hum of war, the wail of sirens, the pleas of desperate people knocking at the department's doors. She has dedicated her life to helping the poor and vulnerable, but now her work takes on a new and urgent meaning. Within days, German occupation forces seize control. New laws are passed, swift and merciless. Jews can no longer work in government offices. Jewish families, once recipients of welfare assistance, are now officially invisible, stripped of help, stripped of rights, stripped of their humanity. Sendler, however, refuses to look away. She and a small group of colleagues, bound together by a shared sense of defiance, take matters into their own hands. They forge documents, falsify medical records, and manipulate bureaucratic loopholes to provide aid where it is now forbidden. By November 1940, the Nazis take their cruelty one step further. Warsaw's Jewish population, nearly 400,000 men, women and children, are forced into a walled-off prison, the Warsaw Ghetto. Disease festers in overcrowded apartments, hunger gnaws at stomachs, and the stench of death becomes a daily reality. The walls are supposed to keep Jews in, but for Irena Sendler, they are nothing more than an obstacle to be overcome. With her official government credentials and a special permit to check for typhus, one of the Germans' greatest fears, Sendler gains entry into the ghetto. What she sees chills her to the bone: skeletal figures with hollow eyes, children scavenging for scraps, entire families packed into single rooms. But she does not come empty-handed. Hidden beneath layers of clothing, she smuggles in medicine, food and supplies. Each time she steps through the gates, she risks everything. Then, in the summer of 1942, the horror deepens. The Great Deportation begins. Thousands of Jews are rounded up, packed into cattle cars and sent to Treblinka. Most will never return. The time for caution is over. Irena and her fellow activists shift their mission. No longer is it about providing aid to those suffering inside the ghetto. Now, it is about getting them out. They use whatever means they can. Secret tunnels, hidden compartments in ambulances, even disguising children as Christian orphans. Infants are sedated and placed in toolboxes or buried beneath sacks of potatoes. Anything to get them past the Nazi guards. If caught, the punishment is clear: death. Not just for the rescuer, but for their entire family. The stakes could not be higher, but Sendler does not hesitate. On October 18th, 1943, the air in Warsaw is sharp with the onset of autumn, and the city, under the heavy boot of occupation, holds its breath in anticipation of the coming winter. But inside the small apartment of Irena Sendler, there is no time to worry about the cold. The walls are lined with papers, documents, names, scraps of a resistance operation hidden in plain sight. Then the dreaded knock. Not even a knock, really. A pounding. She knows what it means. The Gestapo. They storm inside, ransacking everything. overturning furniture, searching for anything that ties her to the Jewish children she has saved. Her heart hammers as she discreetly passes a tiny bundle of papers, lists of names, addresses, identities, to her friend Janina Grabowska. In the chaos, Grabowska shoves them into the folds of her clothing. It's a risk, a desperate gamble. If they are discovered, every child on that list is doomed. But in the madness of the raid, the Germans never search her. The children's secret is safe, but Irena is not. She is dragged from her home and taken to the Gestapo headquarters. The interrogations begin immediately. She is beaten, fists slamming into her ribs, her face, her legs. The Gestapo demand names, her network, her contacts, the locations of the children. But she says nothing. Each question is met with silence. Each refusal brings more blows, more pain. Bruised, bloodied, barely able to stand, she is thrown into the hell that is Pawiak prison, a place where few emerge alive. The weeks that follow are filled with suffering. She is interrogated again and again, tortured, and yet she does not break. Then the final judgment comes. November 13th, 1943, she is taken from her cell, her sentence sealed, execution by firing squad. It is the fate of so many in Pawiak prison, resistance fighters, informants. She is dragged from her cell, forced onto the road to what should be her death. But fate, or perhaps something greater, intervenes. The plan has been set in motion behind closed doors, among those who will not let her sacrifice be in vain. Zegota leader Julian Grobelny secures a bribe. The money is transferred carefully, covertly, by Maria Palesta and her teenage daughter. It reaches the right hands, the hands of the German guards assigned to escort Irena to her death. On the road to the execution site, something impossible happens. A whispered word, a quiet exchange, a shift in routine. The guards pause. They hesitate. Then they unlock the shackles and tell her to run. She does not hesitate. With broken bones, bruises darkening her skin, and pain searing through her body, she stumbles forward into the unknown. The city of Warsaw, battered but not broken, swallows her into its shadows. She disappears into the underground, into the network of the resistance. The Germans list her as executed. The name Irena Sendler is officially dead, but she is very much alive, and she is not done. By mid-December, before her wounds have even fully healed, she is back to work, back to smuggling children out of the ghetto. The Warsaw Uprising began on August 1st, 1944, as a last-ditch effort by the Polish resistance to liberate the city from Nazi control before the advancing Soviet army arrived. The air was thick with anticipation, as the city's underground army, the Home Army, launched a coordinated attack against German forces. Armed with little more than sheer will and basic weapons, the resistance fighters flooded the streets of Warsaw, determined to reclaim their home from the brutal occupation. It was a courageous but doomed attempt, facing a well-equipped German army that would stop at nothing to crush the rebellion. The Nazis retaliated against the uprising with a level of brutality even she had not witnessed before. The city burned, its people were slaughtered in the streets, and entire districts were reduced to rubble. But amidst the devastation, Sendler and her network worked tirelessly. The hospitals were overflowing with the wounded, civilians, resistance fighters, children. She moved between them, forging new identities for those who had lost everything, smuggling medical supplies past German patrols, and coordinating escape routes for those still being hunted. Her knowledge of Warsaw's underground tunnels, safe houses, and secret passages proved invaluable. As Nazi forces crushed the rebellion with overwhelming force, the destruction became absolute. By October, the uprising was over. Warsaw lay in ruins. Over 200,000 of its citizens had been killed. Those who remained were rounded up and sent to concentration camps or forced labour, but Irena Sendler had once again survived. As others fled, she remained in Poland, ensuring that the children she had saved would never be forgotten. In 1945, after war had ended, as Warsaw smouldered in the aftermath, she turned her attention to what came next, rebuilding lives. Her hospital, now at Okęcie, was in desperate need of resources. She hitchhiked on military trucks to Lublin, pleading for funds from the fledgling communist government, and when she secured them, she returned to turn the ruins of the hospital into the Warsaw Children's Home, ensuring that the war's youngest victims would not be left behind. She had hidden lists of the children she helped save, painstakingly written on scraps of paper and buried in jars beneath an apple tree. Now she unearthed them, handing them over to Jewish leaders. But the names they held were ghosts. The war had stolen their parents, their families, their homes. What should have been reunions became something else, a heartbreaking reckoning with the cost of survival. With Poland now under Soviet control, Sendler adapted. She threw herself into social work, becoming a powerful force in Warsaw's municipal government. She had learned, in the hardest of ways, that saving lives was not just about dramatic rescues, it was about what came after. She fought to establish orphanages, care homes, and shelters for the forgotten, the displaced, the unwanted. But this new Poland was not the one she had dreamed of. The communist regime was ruthless in its control, and though she rose through the ranks, the same government she served once turned on her. She was interrogated, accused of hiding enemies of the state. She lost her unborn child, a final wound from a life defined by sacrifice. But still she pressed on, wielding bureaucracy like a weapon, cutting through red tape to force change where she could. For decades her wartime heroism was all but forgotten. It wasn't until 1965 that Yad Vashem honoured her as righteous among the nations. And even then, it would be another 35 years before the world truly took notice. In 2000, a group of American high school students uncovered her story, dramatising her efforts in a school project titled Life in a Jar. The play spread, the world listened, and Irena Sendler, now in her 90s, was thrust into the light once more. Irena Sendler passed away on May the 12th, 2008, at the age of 98. She was buried in Warsaw's Powązki Cemetery, a final resting place in the city she had given everything to save. But her legacy did not die with her. It lives on in the thousands of lives she touched, in the generations that followed, in the knowledge that, in the darkest of times, one person's courage can change the course of history. She had no weapons, no army, just conviction, just compassion, just the unwavering belief that every life, every child was worth saving. And for more than 2,500 of them, she was right.